I see quite fresh faces after the party of yesterday, so it's good. Still, mine is not so good maybe, but fine. So, yeah, I'm Ernesto Boado. I'm the CTO at Aave, and yeah, I'm gonna do a small presentation about centering in like how in Aave we managed to deploy on different chains apart from Ethereum, from where we start and where we have actually the focus, like a bit of like internal insights of things that are maybe not so clear sometimes. I hope it will be interesting, and then maybe some more speculative ideas of what can come next, some alpha leaks maybe. So, yeah, basically this is the result, the visible result on Aave of Crosschain, of like multiple deployments on multiple blockchains. But well, to arrive to this visual component, like there is quite a lot of work in the background, like a lot of economic work and pretty good tech work. That is the one that I know the most. No? So I have quite strong opinion about certain things. So like don't be so scared like about that thing. So I hope it's fine. Yeah, I will start a bit giving a bit of overview of how the deployment of an Aave market works. Like probably almost all of you are familiar with the V2 of Aave that is deployed on mainnet. Is the biggest Aave market, but we also have the Polygon that is also quite big, and some other, and the AMM market that is also in Ethereum L1 that has a bit of different assets. But well, all of them like share quite a lot of the analysis that needs to be done like before the deployment and even the tech. So I will just go a bit of through all the points that needs to be checked quite in detail. So. First of all, like how Aave or like the Aave community decides where to deploy a market. That is the first question: when to deploy a market and which one to choose, right? So there are plenty of options out there. Like every time there is more and more, but especially at the moment, not like maybe 3 years ago, 2 years ago, like there are really good solid solutions that actually are, let's say, production ready for a money market or like a pool, liquidity pool, like Aave. No? So you have Polygon, you have now Arbitrum, Optimism, like you have some other things like Solana and well, plenty of others. Probably I mean I forgot a lot for sure. So what is the first thing that needs to be checked? So the first thing is like what I say, that now there are like technologies that are ready for production. So when I say ready for production is that the chain security, that is the most base layer of a chain. So with that I refer to the consensus mechanism that needs to be solid enough. Like right now, like there is pretty good things out there, like not only Ethereum, even if more or less everybody shares same concepts. The bridging, because without connection with Ethereum, at the moment we kind of realize that almost nothing works well. So it's pretty important, like how solid is the bridge solution, both in terms of implementation and in terms of UX for the people that is doing the bridging of the assets or anything else. I will go a bit further afterwards. Then the $1 million question always is like, is it EVM compatible or like fully compatible or not fully compatible? Like when a chain is evaluated. So this makes quite a lot of the difference. Is that even if initially like people was like not so convinced about this being always EVM compatible, like because they would say, okay, then the technology is just superior, so why we should actually bend to Ethereum, to a virtual machine that is a bit old and so on. But the reality is that the most scarce resource at the moment in Ethereum, but in the blockchain development is actually people that knows how to do things. So and the EVM is actually that. It's not only a virtual machine, not a technical implementation, but it's more like even a tool of coordination of developers. Like there is plenty of developers out there like that they already know how the EVM works, already know how to work with Solidity, with Viper, and there is plenty of tooling, like still improving, but at the moment, like plenty of tooling that more or less people is familiar with, and they are comfortable to implement things in a solid way. You know? So yeah, that is the that is the one of the main questions. Like from my perspective, I'm a hard believer on the Ethereum technology. So always like I'm quite biased in the sense like if something is not EVM, we will check like also, but I'm already a bit skeptical to start with. So. Then what I call the chain UX, which is not only the visuals and then the website where you interact with that chain, but it's everything around. So like there needs to be, for example, support of meta transactions is a cool feature because it allows developers to do like interesting things there. Obviously the speed of the chain maybe is not so important in some cases. I mean, at least not critical, but is a good point. The cost of the transactions, like in previous talk, for example, it was one of the main points on governance coordination technologies that is quite basic that you have cheap transactions in that case. So like rollups, other chains, like they try to solve that, more or less successful, and we will see how it will be in the future. But at least right now is one of the reasons. For example, in the case of the Aave Polygon market was one of the main points of success of the market because it gave access to people that was a bit left out by the gas fees in Ethereum, access to exactly the same technology, just with a bit, or not only a bit, but underlying different like coordination of the chain and so on. So. And like part of what I mentioned before with EVM, like the main point is developers. No? So like it's quite important that like these chains have really good tooling, really good documentation, and if possible, people that is already building some other things out there. Because end of the day, like the Aave market, yeah, it's cool by itself, but if you will not have everything else that is above, like on top of Aave, then like Aave will not be so big or so successful, or however you want to determine it. So yeah, developers at the end of the day is probably the most important of all of this. Now going a bit more into the details, those were more like general points. And there are certain aspects that are really key in the case of Aave. No? First of all is the oracles. So a liquidity protocol like Aave obviously is everything about prices. Like you have over collateralization, you have debt, you have like a lot of points where price is fundamental. So liquidations needs to be solid because end of the day that is what makes the protocol resilient. And like the pricing of interest rates for utilization, so on. So oracles are one of the most fundamental parts of any Aave market. So what is important in oracles? Obviously, in this case, I'm quite biased because we are using Chainlink, as probably knows, since the beginning, since the version 1 of the protocol, and mainly because of the first point. Like Chainlink just works. Like then there can be some discussions about like how it's done or not, but it just works. Like for example, the Aave market never had any real problem with updates of oracles, even in terms of high congestion and so on. So it just works and works well. Then how decentralized are the oracles? Then is when things start to get a bit more polemic. In the case of Chainlink, is a decentralized network, so is also a pro on that. But in some other cases, maybe it's a bit less. But you know, it depends. Like if it's suitable or not. Then the third point is the most frequent like source of like headaches for a lot of people out there, especially maybe in Binance Smart Chain and so on. So that is really important that the oracle, even if not mandatory, and even in some of the markets of Aave is not the case, but it's important that there is completely async, in the sense that you cannot use capital mainly sourced in a lot of cases from flash loans to manipulate the price and basically screw like the market itself. So it's quite important. Not always. It's not always the case, because with some tokens it's not so easy to do data sync, but it should be. And then, yeah, I mean, battle tested is part of the first point. Like, obviously, right now, if Chainlink was maintaining markets for 2 or 3 years, or some other solutions like, I don't know, like MakerDAO with their Oracle, they are just technology that works and is proved in the history that it does. Then liquidity. So the liquidity protocol is really fine to have the technology, but if you don't have the assets, or if you don't have a good amount of assets, like it doesn't work. So it's really important that you have, especially for liquidations, that there is a liquid market connected with the chain before doing any deployment to be sure that there will be no problem when people try to get rid of the collateral and repay the debt, sell, and those kind of operations. So it's completely fundamental. In the case, I put the example of Polygon, but since the beginning, a lot of other platforms were deploying there, like the contracts, like, well, you have Sushi, you have Curve, you have Paraswap, and with programs like of incentives that made those AMMs to grow quite fast, and basically it helped Aave to be resilient on when prices went down and so on. So it's pretty fundamental. Then yeah, about the chain infrastructure is, with this I refer to everything that is in the background of the chain that is maybe not so fancy as the consensus algorithm, but in the day-to-day of developers is actually what we see. No? So it's really important that you have a solid infrastructure of nodes, for example, to query the data, that you don't have like technologies, indexing technologies like the graph, they work well in the chain and so on. Like, then explorers is also some really important point, because even if it looks that, and it is the case, that the chain will just work without explorers, like end of the day there will be some problems and people will need to actually go to the explorer, maybe do some operation, and especially for visibility of smart contracts, that right now basically is a standard that if you don't have the smart contracts validated on the explorer and completely public, well, probably you should not trust to use the platform. So is quite fundamental. In this case, obviously, like Etherscan is like a really bonus point of any chain, because they have a really good product that everybody knows. And yeah, part of what I mentioned before is like, yeah, if there are robust providers that already like have experience on other chains, well, better even. So like Alchemy, Infura, buidling, Polygon. So like people that is working on this like for already a long time, and they know what they are doing. Then the asset bridging. So yeah, as I said before, the liquidity is really important, no? But how you do the bridging of the liquidity is probably even more important than that. So first of all, there should be let's say, official solution for bridges, like on the chains, which is developed by the team that is behind the development of the network, at least initially, because this gives assurance that they will not basically leave you like in the sidewalk if something happens. Then there are some other models also, like the two-sides liquidity that usually is by other teams looking for some kind of profit in the middle, liquidity providers, but is also quite important to have these alternative models, because if it assures you that if there is any problem with the type of technology of the official bridge, like you will have some alternatives that are quite different actually in the workings, and so it's not so easy to happen something bad to happen both at the same time. And then yeah, there is still quite a lot of room to improve in this topic of the asset bridgings, because in terms of user experience, because sometimes like the mapping of the tokens is not is not so clear. Like some tokens that are in Ethereum are basically the same underlying, then they get translated to different tokens, or like even the implementation of ERC20 is not the same. So those kind of details are also quite fundamental when doing a robust analysis of the breaching of the chain. So what's next for Aave? Well, mainly it will be a bit on the community, but the talks that are around is obviously quite centered on the topic of rollups, optimistic rollups especially, so Arbitrum, Optimism. But some other side chains are also doing quite good work, so probably there could be opportunities to see the Aave markets there. Yeah, this was more on the first phase of a deployment, which usually is quite centered on the technicalities, on the economics, so liquidity, so implementation, and so on. No? But usually you reach a point where okay, but the Aave market by definition is decentralized, or it tends to be as decentralized as possible, right? So what do you do with the governance? As you can imagine, in the case of Aave and any other projects, like MakerDAO, for example, is kind of in the same situation. Like you have a really robust infra of governance on Ethereum L1, like is battle tested, like everybody knows how to use it and so on. But if you want to reproduce in the other chain, it becomes a bit more tricky. Mainly because maybe you need to do some other type of development to breach or things like that, or you will need to split the governance power between the L1 to control L1 and then some other token to control L2. So it becomes a bit more challenging. So in our case, like we as probably a lot of people knows, and there was some polemic when the Polygon market was deployed, and until now actually there is a multi-sig control in the market, but it was mainly for a technical reason, because it's not so simple, and there was nothing ready actually to make that proper breach of the governance from L1 to Polygon. So what we were working on to propose now to governance is a solution that is bridging the power of the Aave holders on L1 to take decisions on Polygon. Yeah, basically there was nothing so developed in that direction, so we did that, and we call it the cross-chain governance breaches. I will go a bit more in details now. So now it's, by the way, it's public since the morning in our GitHub. You can take a look. But basically, the architecture is this one. So the idea is that you have the governance on L1, and as you probably know, it can do whatever it wants to execute whatever payload is needed after the decision is taken to do in yes. No? So what we did is a specific breach that what it does is that it receives some kind of message from the governance, arbitrary message, can be whatever, calling whatever type of function. And then this breach has the part of the breach in Polygon that takes this message, and actually that part of the breach controls the Aave market on Polygon. What this means is that in practice, the governance of L1 has factually permissions on the Aave marketing in Polygon, so it's quite convenient. I will not go so much in the details. This is public on the GitHub repo, but yeah, the idea is that there is those two parts of the breach, like the FX root in the case of Polygon, and FX child, and it's just just using the message breaching of capabilities of Polygon. Obviously, here, the Aave governance loses a bit of control because it boils down to the security of Polygon itself, of the breaching, but still is the only solution because end of the day, everything will boil down to the same security of the Polygon network. So in this case, like it gets quite abstracted, like the solution. So. The good part of this strategy is that it's applicable also to Arbitrum, for example, and we hope it will be applicable to almost all the types of deployments because it's a really generic solution. So, as you can see in the picture is quite similar in the case of Arbitrum, just some naming details change because of how they manage their bridging, but it's exactly the same idea. So, Aave governance. There is some proposal on the Aave governance. If the yes is the outcome of the vote, there is some function called in this inbox that is the side of the Ethereum side of the bridge, and then on the Arbitrum this message is received by the potential Aave market and executed whatever it needs to be, changing, for example, parameters on the pool, listing new assets. It can be whatever. So, obviously this was designed for Aave, for the Aave ecosystem, but actually it's a quite generic solution. So, maybe you know, but in the governance side, we have a time lock. It is based on a time lock that is quite generic, and well, it can execute any kind of logic. So, and the bridge in the middle, that is basically what was built, is it doesn't even care if it's a governance calling or even if it's a wallet or if it's a multisig or whatever type of smart contract you can imagine. So basically everybody can use it. It has typical capabilities of this kind of smart contracts, that you can use delegate calls in the side. In this case, it will be in the side of Polygon itself. So it's completely generic and it should work for everybody. And obviously, like, it's not limited to any type of time lock. It's just any smart contract can use it. Well, how to use it? Basically, forking the repo that now is public in our GitHub, and of course, like, even if the technology can be reused, like, the configuration is not the same. So, like, depending on the type of project that you are running, like, probably you need to change a bit the configuration of who has the permissions on the Polygon side, on the Ethereum side, and so on. But it's pretty pluggable on anything. And, well, then deploy it. So this was about the markets itself, like some technicalities, like how to set up everything. But what is really interesting is, like, what this cross-chain communication allows to do. No? Not only in technical terms, but also in terms of doing new models of markets, new economic models, and so on. No? So first of all, well, my colleague Emilio, no, put this idea some days ago, that is like, well, Aave has a lot of liquidity, like it has liquidity on L1, it has liquidity in Polygon, no? And in the future it will have liquidity in some other place. So why not using this liquidity as also a way of bridging assets? Like, because if you, end of the day, like, when bridging, like, you care about the security of the bridge. Aave is kind of battle tested that is secure. You care about, like, having liquidity in two sides. Aave has liquidity in the two sides, so why not building something like this? No? And it also has the advantage of the A tokens, in the sense that there could be some models that is even accumulating yield on L1 or in L2 at the same time that you are doing the actual bridge. So there is nothing developed yet, so it's not so alpha leak in that sense, but it's a cool idea. So obviously anybody can contribute and take ownership of these too. So then something quite important, and is that right now, even if governances work, like they don't have so much participation still, and it's an ongoing challenge that everybody is suffering. Like, how you make, I mean, there is a token, there is, like, really big like pool, really good platform behind, but how you engage people to pay gas, like high gas usually, to participate and to say yes or no. what usually happens is that people is not so excited about that. So I believe that is something that needs to change radically if we want like decentralized governance to really scale, no, for anybody. So something that could help on this is actually the idea of the roll-ups or other side chains to Ethereum, no? Because there could be some model where like actually you do the computation. I think in the previous talk it was one of them, like you do the computation on the roll-up of the voting and so on, where it's cheap, you still have the security on mainnet, and then the only thing is that you need to find a way of actually affecting the running system on Ethereum that is not exactly like that, and include those votes there. So like there is plenty of room. It's not only on the roll-ups. It could be like CK technology. There is quite promising research on that direction too, that maybe are a bit more invasive because of how the tokens are working right now in terms of delegation and so on, but it could be really promising. And well, I mean, sidechains is kind of the same. So, and then this one that is, I personally think that is the most powerful, but is not so much talked about, is that when you have Aave L1 and you have Aave Polygon, you create like a trusted ecosystem of two like different animals, let's say, but with the same technology, and that is why from where the trust appears, no? In the sense that you list the different assets in Ethereum, you have different assets on Polygon in this case, and it could be completely different market in terms of assets because at the moment they are kind of the same nature. But what could be done is like having privilege between the two different markets. Right now the markets are completely independent, so like technically there is no relation with them, apart that governors like will control them, but they are completely independent. But what will happen if, for example, like you give certain permissions to the bridge of Polygon to maybe like mint certain tokens on L1 or mint certain tokens on Polygon to do cool stuff? Usually that is quite powerful. It's quite dangerous at the same time because some projects are trying to do the same. But I will say that the big advantage of doing this within the same protocol is that you know that at least there will be no adversarial parties like trying to do weird stuff. And also because coordination is difficult. Like even if you have good partnerships like between projects, I can think about, for example, the idea of Iron Bank. No? It's never so easy to actually really having everybody understanding the potential risks of interconnecting two protocols and, for example, in that case, taking under-collateralized loans based on protocol revenue or whatever. So the big advantage of Aave in this case is that you know that it's the same tech. So you can still do mistakes, but at least the space of problems is way more reduced than in the other case. So that will be this kind of idea. Obviously, it's not. It can be applied for a lot of things. The first thing that comes to my mind is that under collateralized lending, maybe between the two different pools, but there could be a lot of cool stuff up here. And yeah, that's it. As I said, like today we made public the first repo. We have pretty good documentation there, like explaining how to deploy, how it works, more or less what I said, but quite better. And then yeah, the rest, Discord, documentation, and the governance forum, which is where actually all the activity happens. So I think it's better now that if we have some questions, that is the interesting part usually.
Hello. I'm wondering if, so for cross-chain bridges, would you also do cross-chain moving from collateral? So for example, let's say I use Polygon, I've got my collateral there, I'm borrowing, I do all my stuff in there with Aave, and let's say you launch on Avalanche, and I want to move that back to Avalanche. Would that be possible? Or even L1 or Arbitrum or whatever? All my deposits and my landing, move them in one transaction, like a flash loan type stuff.
You mean moving the collaterals only,
collateral
or borrowing?
The collateral plus what I'm borrowing, so that I don't have to liquidate a position to pay it back to then move it to another chain.
Yeah. And that is one of the points, for example, of the last idea of having more interconnection between the markets, because potentially one idea could be that you have the collateral in one chain and you can play with minting, like actually borrowing in another chain.
Yeah.
If the protocol somehow knows that there is like this like depth between different pools on that, so for sure like it could be a
And for example, let's say I've got stuff today on Polygon, and I'd like to move it out of Polygon because I use Polygon because it's low gas fees, but it's looking like it's gonna quickly move to something that's not scalable, at least from what I'm seeing, because I got put up the gas every day to do the transaction. So I'm stressed out about this, and tomorrow you guys do the bridges. Can I move my whole collateral, my whole borrowing? Because you telling me put the collateral on one chain and borrow another one, but I'd like to move everything out without doing any like.
so doing a migration of the
Yeah,
position completely.
exactly,
Yeah, it could be an option. Obviously, that there needs to happen something related with flash loans, most probably,
yeah.
but it will be a matter of like having the bridge, understanding like that doing well the flash loan that you can do at the moment, but like from one place to the other, and like the challenging part on those kind of ideas is that it's still a sink, the bridge. That is when you analyze those kind of problems, that is the root, because the bridge has some kind of delay. It doesn't matter if it's like 1 hour or if it's 7 days or if it's 40 seconds. So at that point, yeah, you cannot use flash loans actually so easily. So you need to do assumptions on liquidity on both sides, and it becomes a bit more tricky. But potentially it could be possible. I'm more bullish in the sense of that the protocol on one side will kind of give a loan or something like that to the bridge, and the other protocol will take it, and doing those kind of combinations, you could close one position and open the other position, like using the tokens. So yeah, it is possible. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Hey, so aren't you worried that stuff like this on rollups, optimistic rollups, will require additional oracles and so on to speed up async messages, like the messages from the rollup to layer one, they are like delayed for 7 days or whatever. So yeah, you could use some kind of oracles to speed up this process, but then this is like additional, I don't know, security assumption or whatever.
Yeah, I think like people is not thinking so much in that direction in terms of oracles. Like I know that there is like Maker is doing some research on that.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Yeah. But it's mandatory. Like the issue is that it is kind of an economic issue, because even if you have, imagine like the Maker oracles or even Chainlink submitting like checking the chain on one side when it's breaching and submitting the message to the other faster than actually the chain itself. End of the day, like why there is the delay is because of security reasons. Like maybe something happens with the chain, maybe there is a challenge on optimism and it doesn't go to properly to. So who is gonna take that risk? It could be the case that the Chainlink, for example, builds something like an economic incentive to cover that kind of risk. It could be also like in the protocols themselves, like Aave, saying that okay, we are using this kind of technology, so we can use a mechanism like the safety model to cover potential risk of this. So I mean, it's possible, but obviously it's quite challenging, because you will boil down to security of a blockchain. So yeah. Let's see. I think it will take some time.
Hi, thanks for the talk. So, from what I understand, what's happening now is governance infrastructure is essentially replicated on every network Aave is going to be. And if you have Aave token on that network, say Polygon, you're eventually going to be able to vote with those tokens in the governance decision related to the Aave implementation on that network.
Actually, this one is not about that. Like this one is that the same tokens that can vote on mainnet will control actually Polygon. Okay, then, because to make what you say, what you need to do is actually probably the reverse way, or doing some merging of the voting power there, which probably is not a good idea.
Okay, so essentially everything is still on mainnet. It's just a decision they take has. Okay, it makes sense.
Mainly, why this proposal was done this way It's like if I have assets that vote and you have a system that is quite based on delegation, so people has, for example, cold storage, they gave delegation to another and so on. The least thing that you want to do is actually going to your custodian and moving the assets to Polygon, where maybe is not so, you don't believe so much, but you still want to vote. So why not using the security of Ethereum L1 to do that? Then the problem that you mentioned of like being able to vote with the Aave tokens on that network, that is a different, completely different story. But it's something that also needs to be solved, because obviously right now like there is quite decent amount of Aave tokens in this case on Polygon, and they are not able to vote. Mainly for a technical reason, not because of anything else. It could be perfect if everything will be able to vote. Yeah.
So like the end vision, let's say, for this cross-chain governance is a bit of a master-slave logic, let's say, where Aave token mainnet votes on everything and have capability on every network. But then at the end of the day, you'll have, say, Aave on Polygon token would be able to vote on the decisions pertaining to the Polygon market, but no power over the other market or mainnet.
I mean, going more into the speculation realm, no? I believe that if all the chains will be really, really solid with the history of Ethereum, because end of the day, like it's being battle tested, the best situation will be having an hybrid, like not actually Ethereum having the control on everything else, but a bit of like separated system, and then some like settlement layer between all of them. The reality at the moment is that Ethereum is what really works, so it's kind of natural to start with Ethereum, like, and once the others take some control, probably the community will say, okay, let's try to build another system that actually makes more importance on the network, on Polygon or in any rollup. Or, yeah.
Makes sense. Thanks.
So basically, just on that idea that was talked, like that could be a big governance on mainnet for issues that are common to any market, whatever the chain it is, and sub-governances just to control the market on Polygon and the market on an L2 just for some parameters, and that doesn't need to have action on mainnet markets or on other markets. That could be like a system where you have the big master for the like proposal that needs to have an impact on the whole ecosystem of Aave and other sub governance, just to have like quicker actions on the market.
Like right now, like the solution is quite targeted to a particular chain, in the sense that if you want to interact with take a decision on the Polygon market, you need to go to the bridge smart contract on Ethereum that interacts with the Polygon side. But ideally, it should be like most probably one smart contract and certain type of decisions will just go to that smart contract, one proposal, and they will get spread, like redirected to all the markets. The thing is that they are quite isolated, like the markets, is because they should be that way. Like why there are multiple markets mainly is because the asset composition is not always the same. So like, are there so many decisions that affect all the markets at the same time? There are in some cases, but usually it's not so frequent. Like because the LTV in some market is different, or the asset listing is different on another, so it's not so common. But yeah, ideally it should be like that in some cases. Yeah.
Okay, and in the same logic, there will be like a safety module on each market on each chain for the markets.
I think the approach with the safety model for now should follow the same as with the governance. Like Ethereum is like, in the case of the safety model, is even more critical, like because the funds are stored there. So like Ethereum is like the main layer, and it just will use or will cover the other markets if decided with the funds. In that case, is quite simple, because if there is some slashing, it will be a matter of like moving funds out of the safety module, liquidate however it needs to be done in L1 or in L2 the assets to cover certain loss, and then bridge them to make the covering on the other market. So I think it's not so complicated actually.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot for the presentation. I kind of came halfway, so I don't know if you covered it, but when you thinking about sort of the cross-chain pools to pools, have you also considered how these sort of cross-chain communication elements could also interact with other form of protocols that are on different chains as well, or is it just for Aave in particular?
No, not really. It's completely generic. It's like if the chain has the capability of emitting like arbitrary messages in evidence, usually is what they do. Like you can basically do whatever you want. Like it doesn't need to be like the governance of Aave could decide to interact with not actually the market of Aave in Polygon could interact with any other contract, and some other system from L1 could interact with the Aave market or something else. So like it's not limited to Aave at all. Like anybody can just use. Okay, I suppose that's it. Thanks.